Hello and welcome to another installment of the Poet's Voice reading series sponsored by Black Moss Press. My name is Alicia LeBay and I'll be your host this afternoon. I have with me two lovely, well-known poets from Windsor, Ontario. We have Laurie Smith here. Laurie Smith earned her Master's in English Literature and Creative Writing from the University of Windsor, having studied under Alistair MacLeod. She is the co-publisher and editor of Cranberry Tree Press in Windsor, Ontario, and her work has appeared in many publications across Canada and the United States. Her collections include Menagerie, The Truth About Roller Skating, Smack in the Middle of Spotlit Obvious, and Said the Cannibal. She has edited several poetry anthologies, and she regularly facilitates creative writing workshops, some of which involve wine. Welcome, Laurie. And we also have joining us Marianne Mulhern. Marianne Mulhern is a Windsor poet. She has 7 books published by Black Moss Press. Her first book, The Red Dress, received national attention when she was interviewed by Mary Heens, host of Tapestry CBC Radio. The Red Dress became a bestseller. Touch the Dead and When Angels Weep were shortlisted for the Acorn Planters Award. Her newest book of poetry, The Midnight Moon Sings of Murder, features the Donnelly tragedy in Lucan, Ontario. She also has the honor of being Poet Laureate of Windsor, a city she proudly calls home. Thank you, Marianne, and welcome.
Thanks.
So welcome to both of you, and thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. And I'd like to begin with a question for Laurie. So Laurie's second spit is about poison, but it encompasses a much larger dimension than just someone drinking something poisonous. Could you tell us about some of the other forms of poison and how you engaged with them in your poetry?
So many ways. It's not just poison, like you said, drinking it. There's a poisoned arrow somebody gets in one of them, and the ring with that you pour into a glass of wine, poison in food, accidentally food poisoning, or purposeful murderous food poisoning. There are, issues with ecology and pollution of the world and how we're poisoning our own environment. What else? The poison of disease and the poison of cure, as in the cancer chemo treatments that a friend of mine endured. The poison of relationships and addictions to love, or the poison of pain when something goes wrong. So it covers a lot of ground. Did I miss anything?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered it very well. So we're going to turn it over to Marianne, and not to put a play on words here, but there was real poison between the Donnellys and the community. Could you speak to the effects that so much hatred can have on a small community?
Yes, William Donnelly, the eldest Donnelly son, and definitely the most articulate, said, if a stone fell from heaven, it would be blamed on the Donnellys. The Donnellys were blamed for just about everything that went on in the Lucan area, from barn burnings to cattle theft to horse thievery, on and on and on. William Donnelly voiced it very well when he talked about a stone falling from heaven. It would be blamed on the Donnellys. The Donnellys, first of all, were very successful. They were successful farmers, and William and Robert Donnelly founded the Donnelly Stagecoach Company, which was in direct competition with the Flanagan Stagecoach Company. There were actually road fights in which passengers were flung into mud and snow. The Donnellys were also very successful farmers. People don't like those who have a lot of success. And to top it all off, the Donnelly boys were really handsome. So they attracted girls from the more prosperous families. And there was a man who came into Lucan at the time. His name was James Carroll. James Carroll had neither good looks nor success. He hated the Donnellys, and he crowned himself as a constable. He wasn't a constable, but he said he was, and people believed it, just like they believe things that Trump says today. So since James Carroll hated the Donnellys, he fed into that. And then the parish priest, Father Conley, was either naive or arrogant or both. And he said negative things about the Donnelly family from the pulpit. William Donnelly strongly objected. And then Father Conley actually started the so-called Vigilance Committee. William Donnelly recognized it immediately as a possible hate committee, and he protested to Father Conley and to Bishop Walsh, and he said, if this committee is allowed to continue, there will be bloodshed. And furthermore, the Donnellys did business with both Catholics and Protestants, and at the time, in the 1880s in Lucan, Ontario, that was a no-no. And so hatred kind of fueled around them. And it all came together on the night of February 4, 1880, when this vigilance committee met in the schoolhouse on the Donnelly property. This group, led by James Conley, got drunk, chose weapons, broke into the Donnelly home, and mercilessly murdered James Donnelly, Johanna Donnelly, Tom Donnelly, and young Bridget, the niece they'd brought from Ireland. So there was a lot of hatred in the community before the murders. And that, to this day, I actually think there hasn't been justice for the Donnellys, because sadly, the court case was heard in the old London courthouse. William Donnelly said from the beginning, if the trial is in London, the verdict will be not guilty. And it was, even though there was an eyewitness, young Johnny O'Connor, a farmhand who had slept in the Donnelly house that night. When they put the house on fire, he escaped and ran to a neighbor's house, told the story. He was a witness at the trial, but someone got word to the jury that he was the bootlegger's son. Johnny O'Connor was the bootlegger's son and therefore could not be believed. The jury bought it, and the verdict of not guilty was announced in that. And I was in that courthouse about 6 months ago. I went there because I wanted to feel that atmosphere, and I could almost imagine those words.
It's incredible what hatred can do. Laurie, can you talk a little bit? You had mentioned about putting poison in wine with the ring and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about why, in your poetry, why somebody would want to poison somebody else?
Well, all kinds of reasons. Competition. I've got a cute one that talks about King Joffrey and the Game of Thrones, and for fans, they know what happened to him. Again, that was, the amulet with I think we did figure out who did it though. Why someone would want to poison others? Sometimes it's just whatever causes people to cause harm to other people. That's it. That kind of hatred, though, has the secondary effect of the vitriol, that poisoning of somebody's mind to the fact that they loathe themselves. And in the case of Alan Turing, I'll read that poem now. Alan Turing, as you probably know, was the code breaker, World War II, England, and he's the one who broke the German codes so that the tides of the war turned and the Allies won. But it came out afterwards that he was gay, and that was illegal at the time. This is called inequation, and he was a mathematician slash codebreaker, so that's his big thing. And it's ironic because I don't do math, I was an English major. But anyway, this is called inequation for Alan Turing. So who is truly without sin? Isn't that the point of apples? They hang from trees like ovaries, testicles, tempted by gravity to fall. The fallen, Eve, Snow White, or was it the vengeance of some evil witch? Was it the crime of the jealous, ignorant, the indifferent, the know-it-alls who couldn't break the code and save the world without him? A man ends the war and is castrated for his troubles. No ticker-tape parade, no turn the other way, gracious acceptance, no love is love in post-war England, where Newton's genius was lauded, but Turing's was tainted, criminal. Not considered history book heroic. Not an influence appropriate for prep school lads, yet not something just given its due privacy. I think Alan saw the poetry of poisoned apples when he solved his last equation. Story goes that yes, he had the option of imprisonment or chemical castration as his punishment when he was found guilty of lewd behavior. He chose the chemical castration, but I'm not sure. It was within a very few years that he took his own life, and it's said he fed himself a poisoned apple. So I just, I like the irony of that, because apples, they do show up a lot in this collection. In a lot of my poetry, there are a lot of Eden, Eve references, and apples. An apple a day can keep the doctor away, or an apple with, right down to the pits inside the seeds are full of arsenic or cyanide. I can't remember which poison it is, but they're toxic, and yet they represent wisdom and so many other things. But yeah, apples for that reason do show up as such an interesting to work with. And I think it was interesting that he chose that method.
There's definitely something very symbolic in that. So I love that imagery of the apple and the sort of reference to religion that you were talking about there, Laurie. And I know that religion, Marianne, Liz, you were saying, played a very big role in the Donnellys and what they went through. I know you have a poem for us that you want to share, so we definitely want to hear that.
Yes, religion did play a big part because it was so dominant. What I want to just refer back to for a moment is the quote from William Donnelly: "If a stone fell from heaven, it would be blamed on the Donnellys," because there was an incident in which a neighboring cow disappeared, vanished, and the so-called vigilance committee that had been set up by the priest came to the Donnelly home, and by this time Johanna and Jim Donnelly were very elderly, and this group came with sticks and clubs, very threatening, and young Bridget Donnelly, the niece from Tipperary, was there in the home at the time, and she witnessed this behavior and was totally frightened by it. What people didn't realize is that a couple of days later, the cow just came back as if nothing had happened. And my brother has a farm near London, and he had cows. And he said once in a while, a cow would just vanish from the pasture, and a couple of days later show up. He said he thought she went looking for a boyfriend. And maybe this neighboring cow did too. So I'll read that poem. Thompson Cow. A neighbor's cow is missing. Men with sticks and clubs, members of the vigilance committee, swarm over summer grass, accuse Jim and Johanna. I, Bridget, smell hatred, raw as butchered meat. So I think that poem illustrates what you were talking about earlier, the hatred in the community, and how Jim and Johanna were totally innocent of this, and so was Bridget, and yet they were murdered later anyway.
That's, yeah, for sure. That's very terrible and very sad. We do have a little more time, so Laurie, if you want to read us another poem, and then Marianne will finish off with another poem from yourself. We do have some more time.
Let me see. Night Sky. We got a poisoned arrow in this one and some Greek mythology. Night Sky. Sun in Libra shines on Chiron the centaur, there by blood, by poisoned arrow, crafted by his own hand. It was all a huge mistake, wasn't it? Opening that Pandora's box, opening that sacred barrel of wine, the scent of decadence, immorality. Half humanity storms the doors of anarchy, drunk on Dionysian freedom. Someone must shut it down, a hero with a deadly quiver, Herculean nerve. There's always fallout, the ricochet of well-meaning, the victims always the innocent. Chiron, fight through the dreadful pain of immortality, powerless to heal the real issue, the system itself. Multi-headed hydras, an executive mandate, powers that be stagnant, the law of the land, and Olympia. You know, sometimes deals are made. We have another prisoner suffering. Trade your heritage for his freedom. Barter away that immortality and die in peace. Let a good man carry on. Go and balance the constellations. It's a little heavy for a Monday afternoon. And yeah, I forgot to mention there's a little bit of politics going on in that one too. But I think politics are a poison in itself.
I think that the two books in this interview came together really, really well. And I'm thinking of Laurie's theme of poison and how that's so political and contemporary. Like Laurie mentioned that it was political because Putin uses this for his enemies and it's deadly. And the hospitals don't even know how to treat it. So maybe Laurie, you could speak a little more to that.
Pronounce the name of the stuff that he uses, but it's interesting that poison kind of in politics it's always equated with like the Lucretia Borgia or how to kill off the last pope kind of a thing, amulets and rings and whatever. But the irony is in that Putin is still resorting to these old standbys, these old favorites. Yeah, like a letter full of white powder is dangerous and shuts down a community or a post office at the very least, or a government building. A handshake or a pat on the back in an elevator at a hotel and the guy's dead 2 days later. Yeah. It's really kind of interesting how what they haven't moved forward from that method. I guess it's a standby, right?
Poison's used in politics, and we've got a modern day plague. Yeah, we're not that far away from from our medieval counterparts.
I know it's scary. You're supposed to learn from history. Well, sometimes you learn bad stuff. And sometimes you learn the hard way, as we are, what they were dealing with in the 14th century with the Black Plague. When I think about that, it makes me wonder that they didn't really have the explanation then that we have now. They, obviously didn't have the internet. They were living in a small town miles away from a big city, and some peddler comes to town, and 3 weeks later everybody's got black boils all over their body, and they didn't know, and they blamed it on the weather or the church or whatever. So we have the advantage, and isn't it a shame that we haven't utilized the advantage of our communication and our worldwide ability to perhaps address a problem, a human problem. It's amazing that we use the vitriol as rather than an antidote. It's like I can't remember the word I'm thinking of using, but it just encourages it. It makes it worse. People end up fighting over information and their own desire to choose their own information rather than people working together. That's kind of frightening.
I wonder a little bit. I wonder a little bit, as you're saying about people arguing and fighting over the right to choose information and to choose wrong information in many ways. I wonder how much of that played into the tragedy of the Donnellys, and how much of it, like you were talking about this cow, Marianne, and how this cow wandered off, as cows often do, and it was blamed on this family to the point where people were ready for bloodshed.
Yes, because as Laurie was speaking, I was thinking of the poison of words. The poison of words that unfortunately Father Conley used in the pulpit. He did say at one point in the pulpit, prior to the murders, there is an evil among us and it must be rooted out. So he took a biblical reference and he used those words. That just fueled the hatred for the Donnellys, and I think it may have given permission to the neighbors who already hated them to do this, because after the murders, at the day of the funeral, February 6, 1880, Father Conley, who was saying the Mass, threw himself on the coffins and said, "How did it ever come to this? How?" Well, I think he recognized that his words had perhaps contributed to the poison, if you will, in the community that was already festering, and the powder was already there. It just needed that torch to ignite it. And his words perhaps were that torch. And so Laurie has really a good point with information or absence of information. And people today are choosing not to wear masks, not to distance, and not to wash their hands. So we've got this poison among us that's spreading. And so you have to think about it. What has changed? Not much.
Well, they're choosing the easy answers in a lot of cases. And I think people have always done that. And they often turn to the church for an easy answer if the reality is kind of more complicated than where'd my cow go, it's an easy explanation. And especially if you already have something there that you don't approve of, as in, the last president or the next president. And we are talking around the idea of American politics, I know. But people want to go with what they find closest to, okay? And that's what fake news is all about. And where the whole concept of fake news, you put something in a neat little package with as basic a description of it as possible, and it becomes an easily recognizable mantra or slogan, and something people can grasp. It comes down to education. I truly believe that. That's going to be the only thing that really solves this problem. Education, of course, science, and better science education. I'm a geek, so totally in favor of that.
I agree with that. Marianne, if you want to read your poem.
Yes, I'm just going to refer back to your mention of religion. When young Bridget Donnelly was brought from Ireland and first came to Lucan, to the Donnelly home, Johanna was getting old and needed help with the housework, and also they wanted to give Bridget a better life. And so when she went, the first time she went to Mass at St. Patrick's Church, Bridget felt these tensions very strongly, even though she had high expectations. First Mass at St. Patrick's. I braid dark curls, choose my white dress, blue flowers stitched along the hem. People stare, whisper, as if I smell of sin. Father Conley looks away. St. Patrick's Church offers no welcome for Bridget, another Donnelly, denied salvation. One kind word, a smile.
Thank you both, ladies. That was wonderful, and I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say thank you so much for joining us and for taking the time to read and speak with us. I want to thank also all our viewers tuning in from home to watch, and we do this for you, so thank you so much for coming and watching us. A reminder that if you'd like to purchase either Second Spit or The Midnight Moon Sings of Murder, they're available at Chapters or your local independent booksellers. And we will also have some links at the end of this video for some online book retailers where you can purchase these. So stay safe and see you all soon.
Thanks, Alicia.